Hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the founding of Maryland and Georgia. But first I wanted to review just a couple things before we started again. Do you remember what cash crop saved Jamestown and the other southern colonies? Hopefully you said tobacco. Do you remember what the name of the group of people were who would accept passage to be paid by someone else to come over to North America? Then they'd work for that person for about 7 years. Those were indentured servants. What group of people came to North America from Africa to work for no pay and were denied freedom? Those were enslaved Africans. Do you remember what the three cash crops were in the Carolinas? Tobacco, indigo, and rice. To remember the name of the trade route between Europe, Africa, and North America was called? The Triangular Trade Route. Do you remember the name of that route that went from West Africa to the Americas? The Middle Passage. So today you're going to hear about several lawmaking groups. One is Parliament. Parliament is a lawmaking group in Great Britain which is made up of England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. Parliament had many members, and the leading member is the Prime Minister. In today's read aloud, the words Assembly and House are used to describe lawmaking groups in the colonies. We've already heard about the House of Burgesses in Virginia, but keep in mind that each of the groups of colonies were distinct and separate, but they were all influenced by the rules and laws of Parliament in Great Britain. The colonists would consider these laws when they'd make their own. If something worked that they'd already had, they'd keep it. So today, listen to the main ideas or important points about why people left England and other parts of Europe to come to the southern region of North America. So pirates. With so much trade going on, the abundance of ships laden or full of valuable cargo, it was inevitable or unavoidable that pirates would make an appearance in the story. The English colonies, particularly those in the southern region and West Indies, became well known as places where the pirates would hide from the law. These pirates were also known as buccaneers. Buccaneers were a group of men from England, France, and Holland. They would terrorize sailors and capture ships in this region. Because of the success of these infamous pirates who were well known for their bad deeds, some countries were forced to send naval ships to the New World to accompany their trade ships to get safely to port. This new world was turning out to be a place where all kinds of people had the opportunity to become rich. Back on land, the English colonies were expanding. Today you're going to hear about two more colonies, Maryland and Georgia. Both of these colonies have an interesting history. However, the development of Maryland and Georgia was a little different from that of Virginia. So let's begin with Maryland. We've heard that large plantations were prevalent in the South, and Maryland is considered to be a southern colony, but it's geographically in the middle Atlantic region. There were many small farms in Maryland, but there were also a fair number of large plantations in the southern portion. Like Virginia, Maryland's economy was based on tobacco as its cash crop. Before he was killed, King Charles I had given a large section of land in north of Virginia to a friend. This lucky recipient was Sir George Calvert. Sir Calvert, who was also known as Lord Baltimore, received this generous gift in 1632. Sir Calvert was a Roman Catholic. In England at that time, Roman Catholics were not very well liked because they were not part of the official Church of England. The Church of England, or the Anglican Church, had split apart from the Roman Catholic Church. Many people in England at that time believed that the Roman Catholics would be more loyal to the Catholic Pope than to the King, and they didn't like that. However, because King Charles's wife, Queen Henrietta Maria, was Catholic, King Charles tried to be respectful of Catholics to her sake. Delighted by Charles' gift, Sir Calvert named his colony Maryland in honor of Queen Maria. Maryland was different from Virginia because it was controlled by Sir Calvert's family. Sir Calvert's son Cecil determined that Maryland would be a safe haven or a safe place for Catholics. In the beginning, it was. In fact, in 1634, Cecil's brother Leonard Calvert led the first group of Catholics to this colony. Leonard Calvert later became the first governor of Maryland. The colonists in Maryland made a priority to make peace with the local Native Americans right away. They did not waste their time searching for gold. Instead, they immediately established farms and trading posts. They soon settled into organized communities and had laws that were clearly defined. It wasn't long before word got out that Maryland was quite a nice place to live. Europeans searching for a better life free of poverty and religious persecution journeyed or traveled to this colony. And it wasn't just Roman Catholics who came. Other Christians who belonged to different churches came to settle in Maryland too. Before long, Maryland became known as a place that practiced religious freedom, so much so that in 1649, Lord Baltimore had the Maryland General Assembly pass the Act of Toleration. This law stated that all Christians in Maryland would be tolerated or allowed the freedom to worship. The Act of Toleration law confirmed that Christians from other churches, Protestants, Catholics, and others, could practice their religion without interference. The last southern colony to be founded was Georgia. One day, a member of Parliament in London, England, named James Oglethorpe had a brainstorm. Oglethorpe had noticed that English jails were overflowing with debtors. In England during this time, people were put in jail called debtor's prison if they were unable to pay their debts. Sometimes these jailed debtors owed just a little amount of money, but sometimes they owed a lot. Oglethorpe had noticed that these debtors, even those who owed just a little bit of money, were often left in jail to die without any way of paying back the money they owed. His unique idea was to set up a new colony in the North Americas where these debtors could be given a second chance. They would be given land so they could begin a new life. They could work to pay back the money they owed, and then their debt would be forgiven. In 1732, the king at that time, King George II, liked the idea. He gave Oglethorpe a charter saying he could take a band of debtors from England to the land between South Carolina and Spanish Florida. The British Parliament supported this venture by giving Oglethorpe money and ships to make the journey. Upon reaching the new land, Oglethorpe named it Georgia, after His Royal Majesty King George II. Georgia was even bigger back then than the state of Georgia is today. It included much of present-day Alabama and Mississippi, too. However, even though sending debtors to the New World seemed like a great plan to Oglethorpe and the king, it was difficult to persuade many debtors to leave their families and homeland and sail 3,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean to a place where they might not be welcomed with open arms. Once they arrived, the debtors would have to build their own homes as well as gather, hunt, and grow their own food. Many debtors preferred to stay in jail in England rather than face the unknown in the New World. Some might say beggars can't be choosers. In all, about 100 debtors agreed to come to North America, and they began the laborious task of turning Georgia into a colony. As soon as he arrived in Georgia, Oglethorpe met with the leader of the Yamacraw, a group of Native Americans in the region. Chief Tomochichi and the Yamacraw were willing to trade with the English and allowed them to settle there. Oglethorpe worked hard to establish alliances with the Yamacraw and even invited some of them to visit England. Oglethorpe and his band of debtors developed the first settlement in Georgia at Savannah. Of course, King George had another motive in sending settlers to Georgia besides helping the debtors start a new life. As you can see on this map, Georgia is located south of the Carolinas, but north of where the Spanish Florida was. At this point, the British had not established any official colonies to the south of South Carolina, so this was the perfect way to protect the colonies from the Spanish. Georgia served as a buffer zone between the English colonists and the Spanish colonies. This would allow the colonists to keep an eye on the Spanish and their ambitions for growing in North America. But King George didn't realize the Spanish had already claimed the very area he had in mind. And it wasn't long before there was an armed confrontation between the Spanish and British. As time went by, more and more settlers arrived in Georgia. Some of them did not get along with the native people as well as Oglethorpe and his followers had. And the Spanish continued to try to stake their claim to this land. And the buccaneers, or pirates, often attacked vital trade ships. This new colony, the last one to be created, suffered its fair share of problems in its early days. Whereas few debtors would agree to come and settle in Georgia, many poor Europeans from other countries did come and establish farms here. They primarily came from Ireland and Germany. Georgian farmers liked the idea of plantation farming, and as it had proved successful in other southern colonies. However, the colonists soon found farming to be backbreaking work and insisted they needed help. Although it was first decided Georgia would be a slave-free colony, the introduction of slavery soon began. Before long, Georgia became a colony identified with plantation life and heavy use of enslaved labor. Within 100 years of being established, the state of Georgia had more plantations than any other state in the South, and the second number of enslaved Africans, second only to Virginia. Hope you enjoyed the reading today, guys. Bye.